All right, we'll get started. Second. Okay, so this is a really important topic. And the reason it's so important is because what happens in the legal profession and to attorneys is depending on the environment that they come out of, meaning the people that they surround themselves with, and even the people that they grow up with, a lot of your success will depend on how you are able to navigate the world based on that. And just to get started, I want to make a few points that I think are very important and may apply to you or may not apply to you, but probably apply to most people. There are certain people that succeed in the legal profession and do very well. And people, even people that you may be working with, don't often understand like why they do that. And most of the success of anybody in any profession, a lot of it comes down to how they think about things. And the way you think about things is typically something that you pick up from your family, the people you grow up with, the people that you're around. And because of that, certain things will often happen to you in your life based on those things. And it's just a fact. If you grow up in a rural town, for example, your odds of being a successful attorney are far less than they would be if you grew up in a place like New York City. It's just the people that you're around, even your family and your family's social class or income can have a lot to do with it too. So the reason I'm going to talk to you about this today, there's a couple of different reasons. One of the main reasons is because I see so many people that come out of different types of backgrounds, and some people end up being extremely successful practicing law, and others don't. And there are some patterns that determine kind of the background that you come out of and whether or not you're going to be successful. And that's what I want to talk about today. And a lot of this, when you look at people, whether they're billionaires or very successful people, all those people that succeed at those kind of levels have things in common in terms of the way they think about the world. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to just tell you, just to get to the point, what I do is I review resumes all day. I talk to attorneys all day. I talk to law firms all day. And I see people that succeed and are very good at this, what they're doing. And I see people that are continually not succeeding, meaning their careers aren't advancing. They're not always working. They're not getting good feedback. They're not getting the jobs that they want. They're not advancing. Their careers are insecure, meaning they don't necessarily know if they're going to advance, and they're just working from paycheck to paycheck almost. They may be saving money, but their careers aren't advancing. So that's what I'm concerned about. And I want to tell you, regardless of the stage you're at in your career, how you can advance, how you can think about things. And I'll give some pretty detailed examples about this, like what I've observed. And I hope this will help you become much more successful because everything has to do with the way you think about things. You will succeed or fail depending on how you think about things. And so people have different thought processes, people have different ways of thinking. And honestly, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is if you change your thinking, you change your life. If you understand how to think about your career, you're going to do. And I'm going to talk about that and how that affects kind of attorneys today. Again, how you think about your life and your work are often class-based, and they have a lot to do with the expectations that you bring to the game of law. There are different social classes in the United States. There are people of all different levels, and people enter the profession at all different levels as well. So that's just for the first thing. And oftentimes, the expectations of the group that you're around, meaning what success looks like, what the minimum type of performance is, how you should think about your future. These sorts of expectations often are much more important than someone's actual abilities and what they believe is possible. I was in this business group called YPO, and in that group, there are lots of attorneys that own their own law firms. And a lot of them come out of a certain culture. I'm not going to say which one, but it doesn't really matter. Ethnic group very common in Los Angeles. And many aren't that smart. They didn't go to great law schools. But have become exceptionally successful attorneys because they're around, I think, other people that have very high expectations about what you should achieve financially and become extremely successful, even with the ability to get jobs and they start things on their own. And I've seen so many intelligent attorneys, people that go to really good law schools, get jobs in good firms, and then they go into those firms and they fail. And most of the time, that when I see that, a lot of that doesn't have anything to do with their intellectual ability. It could have things to do about their decisions that they're making based on their particular upbringing and environment. And it's very common to see groups from various ethnic groups raised in poverty, who, when I say poverty, not in an economically vibrant household, a household where things were difficult and it's difficult to get ahead to make do, and where your parents may have unemployed or not doing well, or and many of these people end up, a strong number of them, it could be from an ethnic group, but even it could be the person could be any race, it doesn't really matter. They often get into really good law schools, but then they drop out of the practice of law because of the way they think about things. And for example, people from small towns, you typically will not see people from children from places like small towns and farming communities and that sort of thing. You don't really see those people at schools like Yale and Stanford, for example. And I'll talk a lot about this today, but I do want you to understand that, just to get into everything right from the outset, that your parents and the environment that you grew up in has a lot to do about the way you think. And so if you want to succeed, you're going to have to understand how to think in a different manner. So talk about that. Here's an example. It's just not too long ago, I went to a graduation party, and you may not think that this has a lot to do with it. It's a high school graduation party, but it has a lot to do with what happens to people, how they succeed, class, and your worth. And I went to a Malibu graduation party not too long ago. And in this, I was able to I'll show you just certain rules and things that people there were following and what the different was. And I went to these two graduation, they were almost back to back. And I realized, based on what I saw, that one group was successful and the other was unlikely to be successful at all, and why that is. So the first party I went to was in Malibu. It was at a home of a world famous talent agent. The house was like at least 15,000 square feet. It looked like it could be a college campus. At the party, the students who were graduating were selling various pieces of artwork that they'd made in art classes at school throughout the year. And there was nothing all that special to the art, but the students were literally asking major amounts of money for this. Some of the paintings and things that the students had done were above $5,000. There was very few pieces of art that were below $500 of these students. I mean, I'm talking about seniors graduating from high school. There was someone was selling for $500 a matchbox with some wires sticking out of the window. And I was looking at all this, and I couldn't believe that these students thought they had such high opinions of their work. And I was at the party and talking to the parents. The parents weren't that nice. They were stood around in small groups, avoiding other small groups. I went up to speak with several of the adults, and some of them were annoyed. And then the conversations that I did have, and this is a typical type of thing, but this is what happened here. It took less than 5 minutes for the people I was talking to ask me what I did for a living. They would ask about that. They would ask where I lived in Malibu, what street, which means how much I paid, where my kids went to school, whether or not was affording a private school for them, all these sorts of questions. And then I remember I met a doctor, and within 2 minutes, he told me he'd gone to Phillips Andover. And the parents of the children that I'd speak to were very quick to tell me about their child and what they were doing, and if it was prestigious. Parents talking about their kids going to Duke, and then if the school wasn't as prestigious, they would launch into some explanation about why their child was going to this school and that sort of thing. And they would say, for example, the child wasn't going to a really prestigious high school. They might say that they had a really strong subject in biology. They would emphasize that the child wanted to be a respected doctor. They'd also point all these different things out that their kids had done, take AP exams, and it's not the kind of thing. This is the way the party was. I'm just talking about this, all about achievement, my achievement, the children's achievement, the children, if they didn't have a lack of achievement, that it really was achievement, all these sorts of things in the party that were covered by these very wealthy parents. were all about achievement. And the food was very nice. There were men and women in white tuxedos. There were very French sounding hors d'oeuvres and things. And even the servers were look like models, I mean, which they actually do in LA. They have people that come out with very good. But anyway, so they were wandering around. There was a group of women playing harps and violins and cellos, and then the kids were walking around too. But what's struck me about all of this is that the kids had very high opinions of themselves and their work, and they were setting the bar extremely high. Many of them were going to really good schools like Princeton and Stanford, and by all appearances, were going to have very good lives. And then back to the art sale, it's hard to believe a child selling something for $5,000, and I asked how they could potentially charge so much to someone there. And the woman that I asked, I remember, gave me not a very nice look. At one point, I had to use the restroom. I walked down the hall and opened a door to what I thought was a bathroom. It turned out to be a bedroom with a restroom attached. I walked in there. There was a kid that looks like he had passed out. He stood up when I came in. He wandered around the room, bumped into a wall, and then went back, fell back into his bed. I asked him if I could use the bathroom. He didn't care. But when I walked into the bathroom, I saw something. It was hard to believe. The sink was actually a aquarium. So there's an aquarium built into the sink, and I'd never seen anything like it. And obviously, you have to have a lot of money to have a sink that's an aquarium. And when I walked out, I had fun showing some women what I'd seen and took them back in there. And then I walked around and I saw that some of these pieces, when I got back to the party, had even sold. There was a poster of Marilyn Monroe that a student had bought a poster, I guess, from a store or something. And he or she had thrown some different colored paint on it and sold it for $6,000. And so just think about this, how much money is involved here. If someone is spending this much money on art and the parents are throwing around this much money on art, just think about what's going on. For me, it was very difficult to believe. And I asked myself, like, what is the lesson? And I kept thinking about this for a long time. I still think about it. And there's a lot of lessons. So what is the lesson of this? This is extremely relevant to you in terms of how you think about your career and your value in the legal profession, because by all intent, for all purposes, these kids are going to be very successful, and they were successful right then. They're selling pieces that, in some cases, would take an entire summer of someone working in minimum wage jobs to make. Let me tell you real quickly about another graduation party I went to. And this one is even more interesting. So I went to a graduation party. This is probably an extremely typical type of graduation party at a small town in Ohio. And this was about 3,000 people, I think, live there. Each year, maybe 75 students start at the school, and then they continually, for the high school, and then continually are dropping out throughout the year, throughout the 4 years. By the time the graduation comes around, maybe there's 40 or 50 kids. And the kid, I was there for someone's graduation, and I asked the person why so many people dropped out, and he just said it was too much pressure. It caused him to drop out. And then he said, even local employers expect you to have a high school diploma to work there, but they still drop out. And the house I went to for this party was nothing like the one in Malibu. It was just the carpet, furniture, everything was worn. Obviously, there was no decorator. It was just a different place. And it's the sort of home that most majority of people probably grow up in. And so at one point, a group of adults were speaking with one of the graduates and asking where people in the class were going after graduating. It became clear that the majority of them were getting jobs locally, and then many of them were going to colleges. But as the college choices were rattled off, it was clear that everyone was planning to stay close by. And everyone, the entire high school class was going to stay local in Ohio. I think one was going to some places, a couple of Cincinnati, but mainly fairly close, within a couple-hour drive of the house. They said that one student in the entire class had gone out to California to look at schools, and people just made fun of this person. He didn't get into any of them, and he ended up staying in state. So think about this. Your entire class of one place, the first place I went to in Malibu, everyone is going to the best schools they possibly can get into. Expenses no matter, the parents will pay for it. They have high ambitions. And everybody in this small town, all the kids actually have most of the kids have a graduation party. So the school distributes schedules for the events and they start in mid-May. So I guess each day or something, kids from this class are all having these parties, and the parties are inclusive, everyone's invited, all the parents and the children. If 35 kids graduate, maybe there's 25 or 30 parties, and everyone goes to every party. And the food at the party was from Costco or Walmart. We get nacho chips, hamburgers, that sort of thing, Oreos, and self-serve ice cream and things like that. And the adults at the party, this is, again, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but a lot of this happens geographically based on social class sometimes, but almost all the adults were pretty heavy and didn't look very vibrant or healthy. They certainly didn't look like people that had aggressive fitness routines and that sort of thing like they would have in Malibu or doing plastic surgery. A lot of people were wearing shirts representing the school's athletic team, and they seemed all to like each other. Everyone was friendly. If I walked up to people, would be nice and ask me questions and even introduce me to other people, which is the exact opposite of what I experienced the week before in Malibu. And I walked out of this particular part. I felt very good about myself and happy. I didn't feel stressed. I didn't feel put down. I didn't feel that I wasn't good enough. But the party in Malibu was all about high achievement and belonging to a certain group and feeling inadequate. I felt almost poor, bad, and I was buying some of this art. And the party in Ohio was much more welcoming. It was social. The bad food didn't matter. There were nice people, and there was not super high expectations for the kids, and the parents weren't making excuses if the child wasn't going to a top school. And I also noticed that one of the men I knew there got along very well with all the other men, and he said that the people in the town had to get along because they saw each other each day in this community. And every day, in the community, this type of community stood in contrast to the transient, status-driven party I went to in Malibu. And the Ohio parties, there were giant displays of the children and what they've done and accomplished. So they would create several tables, and they put the children's awards and pictures and things, photo albums, pictures on cork boards, printouts of each graduate. There was like a large flag size one, girls volleyball, and each child had a box where wishers could just deposit cards and envelopes and things. And what I realized, because I went to a few over one day, I went to a couple, and then next day. But what I realized was that the kids were celebrating these parties, what were for many of them going to be like one of the most important, best times of their lives. And so they were celebrating their sports success and all these things. And and the kids were sad that they were leaving school because this was, for many of them, what they would consider one of the most important times of their lives before they go to work. And it's accomplishment to graduate from school. And many of these people even never left town. They would go to a nearby college, and then they came back, and there are factories, there are stone quarries, there are different businesses and things. And this is what was going to happen to them for the majority of them, I think, in their lives. And some of them obviously will go out of state and do things, but after college. But for the majority of people, that's what would happen. The children were told they were good enough. People were celebrating them, but the children of Malibu constantly felt, I think, pressure to do better and better. And the adults and children of Malibu had this complete sense of lack, like they weren't doing enough. And at the same time, the children in Ohio felt fine and they felt good about themselves. And I think they were much happier. And so these are two different kind of life philosophies that determine how successful an attorney will be. And I'm going to talk about that right now because it's important that you understand how this matters to your success and what all this means. Attorneys that succeed and people that succeed in any profession, in any profession, set unreasonably high expectations for themselves, meaning they do not, but they try to, for them, they look at themselves as having to do something far beyond what other attorneys do. They look at their peers, they look at their lives, and they believe that they should be doing extremely well and will set these very high expectations. And in this house, in Ohio, that people were not setting those kind of expectations for themselves. They want to be liked and they want to be part of it. They don't want to upset the apple cart. Just the example of the person that looked at some schools in California was being made fun of. And so people are doing their best to be likable and thought highly of by others, not want to stick out. You want to get along with others. You want to be liked by others. And being liked by others means not being too different. It means if you try to do something that is very difficult, maybe you don't look good. If you fail and you don't try it, but you try to get in with the people that you're around. And I'll just be very clear with you, something that you should think about that in your career, like the worst attorneys, when you after you've been practicing several years, and especially with people that you're up against, the worst attorneys out there care about how they look to other attorneys. They want to be liked, they want to participate in gossip, they want to make people think highly of them, even opposing counsel. And if they believe their client is in the wrong, they might not even make their true feelings for the person known. It's interesting. I'll just tell you, when I say the worst attorneys out there care about how they look to other attorneys, this is a dynamic that you may have been part of or not necessarily seen, but I've seen this like countless times. An attorney at a small firm or a middle market firm up against an attorney from a major law firm. What the attorneys from the major law firms often do that are partners and very savvy is they will put they'll talk to the attorney on the other side about whatever transaction, whatever litigation things involved. They will talk to the attorney on the other side. They will often flatter that attorney in a way that makes that attorney take that want to be friends, want to be liked by the attorney from the big firm or the really good attorney. And then the attorney from the small firm will get a bad deal for their client. And I've seen this. I bring this up because I've just seen it so many times. So the attorney at a lesser firm gets manipulated by the attorney at a bigger firm because they want the attorney at the bigger firm to like them. Honestly, I've seen this multiple times. But the best attorneys are advocates, and they're going to do whatever they possibly can to win. They really care about this. It's very personal to them, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that the person wins. They're going to have very high expectations. They're going to want to win every single thing they do or get the best result. That's what they want. They want the absolute best result for whoever they're representing, and they have very high expectations for themselves. And so the group in Malibu had extremely high expectations. If they weren't going to a good enough school, there was an excuse. They believed that they should be asking $5,000 for some piece of art, which is just astonishing. How can you even think that you deserve something like that? Someone in this place in Ohio, where obviously the people probably don't have the kind of money to spend on something like that, but would never even think of something like that. It's just astonishing. And the children there had extremely high expectations of themselves. They had even the woman that was helping the children sell the art. And again, it's just when you think about it, that art was actually selling. So people were having these very high expectations for what they could sell things for, and people were actually buying it. Now, whether or not the parents actually thought it was worth that is a whole other question. Maybe they were doing it to be nice, but people were buying this stuff and giving the children the message that they had a lot of worth. This idea of children selling art for $5,000, where you can literally buy a house in a small town for $50,000, is insane. But think about that. What do they believe in? What do they believe that they can do? So to be successful in the legal profession, you really need to have extremely high expectations for yourself and for your clients. And if you have very high expectations for yourself and your clients, you're going to do very well. If you believe that you're capable of doing well, you're competitive, you judge yourself according to what others are doing and try to and continually will push yourself and to get mad when you're not doing what you should be doing, or then you're not going to do well as you could. You need to think very highly of yourself to rise, and you need to believe in yourself, and your thoughts need to be those of a king, and you need to think that you're going to be successful. You need to believe you're going to be successful. You need to continually tell yourself you're going to be successful. You can't worry about setbacks. You need to always be on top of believing in yourself and making sure that whatever happens, you set even higher expectations for yourself the next time. The most successful attorneys, for example, when they're looking for jobs, will often apply to a lot of places, and they won't give up. And they will, even though they're getting rejected a lot of time. And those who give up, often those who do not give up, often succeed. I've seen some crazy stuff. I'll tell you a funny story, and I got that funny of a story. But I had this guy in Kansas. It was several years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I was working with, and he was at a firm of 6 or 7 people, and he said, I want to work in, I think he wanted to work in California, and without the California bar, he'd never even been to California. And he was a corporate attorney, but also doing some litigation. And I told him, like, this is so far, so such a, what do you call it? A very difficult. There's hardly any reason that would possibly work out. I can help you with it. But sure enough, this guy was able to get, as I got him interviews, even got him a couple of interviews with smaller firms in California. And he said, that's not market. And I was like, the guy was making like $80,000 a year in Kansas, and he wanted to make more than double that. But long story short, he set these expectations for himself, and he actually ended up getting a position at a decent middle market California firm, which just seemed almost impossible. But he set these very high expectations. This is what he wanted. He was going to get it. And when people do that, their minds are just supercharged with this belief that they can do something, and it often happens. And so every attorney comes across other attorneys who will demand unreasonable things. If you're litigating, whatever, you'll come up against people that are going to demand things that are completely unreasonable. They will behave, in intimidating manners. They will be critical of your work, will try to throw you off course. And if you if you don't have the kind of confidence when you're coming up against attorneys like that, you're not going to do well. You need to believe in yourself, and you need to believe in what you're capable of doing, and you need to not get pushed away by others. And if you have the highest expectations of yourself compared to another attorney when you're dealing with anything, you're going to succeed. So just think about that. So if you're representing a client and you have these incredibly high expectations about what this client should get, then you're much more likely to be successful than someone who's not. Think about a attorney with a big lawsuit demanding hundreds of millions of dollars and unwilling to settle for 180 as opposed to $220 million because that's what they believe. And even they're going to make tens of millions of dollars when they settle this. And this is what the most successful people do. They have incredibly high expectations for their clients, for themselves, for what they're capable of. And that's what they do. And they come out of often environments like the one I talked about. When I was at one point in my career, I came across this person that was a Harvard Law School graduate and wanted to work on a case I had. And he was about 1 year out of law school, and he had written a few articles related to this case I was filing. And despite the fact that was working out of his parents' home, I thought he might do a good job briefing one of these cases and assisting me because he was obviously quite interested in the subject matter. And so I talked to him, and when I spoke to him further, he said he moved on and was now doing something else, class actions. And when I started discussing the rates that he would charge me, he told me he was someone that previously might have charged me like $100 an hour or something. And he came back and said he deserved $1,000 an hour. And I said, you have to be kidding. And again, this is a guy that been working out of his parents' bedroom. And he told me he wasn't kidding. And he figured out how much money he was going to be making on a case he was currently working on when it settled. And that was his hourly rate right now. And I was suing someone. So he told me he wanted $1,000 an hour and 25% of my recovery. And he told me that even the paralegals that were working for him were billing out now at $200 an hour. And I couldn't believe that this guy suddenly had gone from someone that was willing to work for me for a very little amount of money to someone that often just almost overnight wanted $1,000 an hour and was just, to me, acting crazy. I was astonished. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And a year later, I was thinking about him, and I just did a search about him on Google, and I learned that he'd settled this giant class action against a public company for $30 million. And I think he must have been 3 or 4 years out of law school. And 3 or 4 years out of law school and filing a class action on your own, I don't even know how that's possible, but he did. And I'm assuming that he got a pretty decent percentage of that recovery. I don't know, at least 6 to 12 million, maybe. I don't know. But wow, think about that. Someone suddenly believing in themselves like that much that they do something like that and make enough money in a couple years out of law school to live the rest of their lives that they want. And so he thought a lot of his value. He thought he was much more valuable than I did. And he's probably made, even I haven't looked him up in a while, but this is to me was incredible. He set unreasonable demands for himself and he believed in himself and it worked. And I've seen very successful people in my entire career that set very high expectations for themselves. They're never held back when people say something is impossible or crazy. When they're in cases where their clients look like they're going to lose or in really bad shape, they still believe that they're going to win and they're going to find a way. And I've run across so many people that have done things like this in my career. I met one guy that started a legal document preparation business and asked me to participate and I thought that's just not sounds like a horrible business idea. And but then within a few years I didn't get involved and I could have right when it started. This company I'm sure you've heard of, but I watched this company in a very short period of time spread all over the country, and then I started seeing it advertised on television, and it was run by the guy that was wanted to start it, and he started it on his own. I didn't believe in it and he believed in it. He thought it was just going to be the most incredible business ever. And to me, it sounded just completely crazy, but he believed in it and he found people to help him with it. He networked with the right people. He impressed people. He got people to invest. He just completely believed that he was going to do something. And I'm sure, I don't know what this company is worth now, but I'm sure it's probably worth over $1 billion. So he just believed he could do it. And this is the kind of thinking that you need to have. So how do you set high expectations for yourself? You set high expectations for yourself if you get into any type of firm, then you believe you're going to succeed and you're going to do more than other people do. And you're going to figure out, you're going to say, after my third year of practice, I want to have $2 million in business and be the highest biller. Anybody that sets expectations like that, I know that sounds very difficult, but anyone that thinks like that typically ends up doing very well. They think what they can achieve. They set a higher bar for themselves and they set than other people that are setting for themselves. And that's how you succeed. You have to have very high bars for yourself in what you believe you're capable of. Successful attorneys often will, this is important, they will do the work before asking for something. They do not go in and believe that they're entitled to something before they do the work. So in order to get anything, whether it's a client, a raise, promotion, you need to do the work. So you need to be the best option for the client. You need to be someone that's worthy of a raise or a promotion. And you need to do all these things before you're going to get rewards. And this is just fundamental that people that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to be, for example, an attorney that succeeds is going to be found by clients. So they will network with the clients. They may write articles. I don't communicate with them in all sorts of different ways. And some clients will want to use them for that reason because the person is seen when other people aren't being seen. So they're out there. They're making sure that they're seen and they're networking with people instead of just sitting around. These attorneys will also outperform other attorneys in transactions and litigation. They'll work harder, they'll find different edges, they will just do better. They'll get raises and promotions compared to others by doing better work and working harder. And so the thing that happens is a lot of people in the legal profession, attorneys, will they certainly believe that they need to work or these sorts of things, but you can't expect to get very far. That when you're going to show more value than everyone else you're around, you have to be the product that looks the best. And attorneys are products. Like when I say you're a product, what does that mean? A product means that if a client is evaluating 5 different attorneys, they're going to choose the attorney that they believe is the best product, meaning does that attorney have experience in what I need? Is that attorney, do they know, do I like them? Do other attorneys think that they're good? What does that attorney look like? And so the clients will choose attorneys that way. And so you have to be able to look like a good product. You also need to do the same thing with with law firms and employers. You need to look like the best product. You need to have the background that looks the best. You need to have the experience that looks the best. You need to have the employment history. You can't get hired if you don't look like the best product. And so keeping in mind that all employers have lots of options when they're hiring people, and you have to be looking like the best product. So the children in this Malibu school, and just it's important to think about yourself as a product, because in any firm, like, people are always thinking about themselves in a way that's like they're very egocentric. They're thinking with their ego. They're thinking about themselves, and they're not necessarily thinking about how they look compared to other people. So in this, the children in this Malibu were offering a product. They were providing a service of this art. They were thinking about how much money they could charge for it. And they were hoping that by having this product that they would make money. And think about the children in Ohio. They were standing by. They would put out boxes where you could put money in there if you wanted for them with a card. And so one group was actually trying to provide some sort of value before asking for something, and the other just asked. And you have to be able to provide value to get something. And again, I'm still amazed by these children selling art for $5,000. I don't think everything's sold for that much, but most of the stuff a lot cheaper. But some was at $5,000. There's nothing wrong with asking for money from relatives and others. But this entire event to me was very symbolic, because there's a lot of people out there that want something to be given to them. And there's others that try very hard to provide a service and then set the price for what they want. And a lot of people in life expect handouts, and they expect advancement without being able to do the work needed to get ahead. They believe that they're entitled to a certain salary. They believe that they're entitled to all these sorts of things without often doing the work needed. So if you want to ask for something from anybody, it's important that you first provide a lot of value and make yourself indispensable. The more value you provide and the better service you provide, the more of a reward you will receive. And what does that mean? It means you always want to be providing as much value as you can, and you can never be expecting a handout. And the more value you provide, the more you'll receive. So the best attorneys are able to provide incredible, like corporate attorneys, for example, advising companies. A really good corporate attorney, that you may think it's outrageous, charging a few $1,000s an hour, but a really good corporate attorney, one phone call with a really good corporate attorney could literally, for a really good attorney, could make the company tens of millions or hundreds of millions, or save them money, all these sorts of things. So there's very good attorneys out there. And then there's average attorneys, but there's people that can provide incredible value. And if a corporate attorney is in a big firm providing incredible value, they can charge incredible amounts of money. If a litigator is doing the same thing, they can charge incredible amounts of money. So the more value you provide to the more people, the more you'll receive. So just think about that. And what does that mean? That means if you expect to get a high salary, if you expect to make a lot of money, if you expect to get the most important work, if you expect to get the best jobs, you have to provide an incredible amount of value, more than anybody around you. You have to look like the most logical choice. So are you, in your current firm, are you providing the most value to the firm? And who provides the most value to the firm? It's typically the person that's bringing in the most business, that has the most client relationships, that does the best work, that has the best reputation in their practice area, and then generates the most money. That's who provides the most value. You have to be able to provide that sort of value to expect to stay around. And it's also that way with layoffs, for example. So right now, there are some issues with the employment market not doing that great. And the people that are getting laid off are typically the ones that aren't providing the most value. So you always have to provide the most value. A lot of attorneys expect that just because they went to a good law school, they're coming from a decent firm, that people should be willing to give them a job. And attorneys don't necessarily understand that the only way that the reason to attend the top law school is because you want to impress potential employers, and that's important. The best attorneys understand that they need to have, in terms of what they look to, how they look to employers, they need to have the best grades, and then they need to have journals and all this other stuff that can make them look good. And then they need to get really good experience later on in order to be employable. And then inside of law firms, people that are just doing the work often expect raises, but there's certain people that are going to work longer hours, are going to do better quality work, that are going to get more clients than other attorneys. And so everything is a competition, and everything you're doing before you get any type of reward, you need to be able to provide value to people. You cannot expect value, and you can't expect the most value by doing whatever, by not trying the hardest. Partners that have a ton of business, they provide a lot of value. They give work to other people. But if all you want to do is work, then people have to provide a lot of hours. Relationships are valuable. Getting things, getting the firm's name out to in the community is also valuable. And but what happens to careers and why a lot of them end is because the attorneys will expect more money, prestige, and other value, other benefits, and the value they're providing. And you can't expect things to come your way without providing value. And you have to always be providing value. And the more value you provide, the better. And you have to think about that because your success comes down to your ability to continually provide value. And the more value you provide, the farther your career will go. What am I doing before someone gives me something? Or what am I doing that other people aren't doing that entitles me to get money, to do well, to get prestige? And so you should always be thinking about that. How can I provide more and more value? What is it that I can do that other people aren't doing? So just think about that, because that's one of the things that happens to a lot of attorneys from different backgrounds, especially from backgrounds that may not be privileged. They will have this attitude that something should be given to them just because of who they are. They went to school or because they know how to do something, and they're never providing more value than other people around them, or looking like they have more value on paper and thinking about how to always do that. And that's something that ends up holding a lot of them back from succeeding. So you can never expect to be given something without providing a lot of value, without providing more value than other people do. And even partners and firms that are able to get a lot of business, people that are able to maintain relationships, a lot of times they'll do things like they'll go out of their way to do things for free for people. They'll go out of their way to help different attorneys sometimes get jobs. If, for example, an in-house attorney loses a job, they may be able to help them get into another company they know. But people are just always providing value to people behind the scenes. Often it's in terms of relationships, it's in terms of all these different things. And before they ask for something, they will do it. This is a funny story, but I'll tell it, about someone I know that's extremely successful. And this person was from Iran, and he had a business where he was basically importing different types of electronics and then selling them to certain stores. He was like a middleman. And so he was trying to there's different Sony PlayStations and things that have come out over the years, but he was trying to get this guy to allow him to sell the next Sony PlayStation to Best Buy and all these different types of places. I don't know exactly how it works, but he would buy at least a few $1 million worth of these PlayStations from this person. I don't know who this person was, but he would buy these, wanted to buy these and then sell, and then he would sell them to these discounts of these stores. And I think there's a lot of money. Like if they sell a PlayStation for $400, this guy that was the middleman was maybe making $100 per PlayStation or something. There's a lot of money involved. And so he was asking this particular guy to sell him the new PlayStations that were coming out. And he was soliciting business from different types of people. And the guy said, no, I have no reason to use you to do this, but you can certainly check back with me if we have different products and things. And so he didn't hear back from the guy. And every time a new PlayStation would come out, he'd call this guy and the guy would just blow him off. And this was a major distributor in the US of PlayStations. And so one day the guy called him on the phone and he said something like, I have $10 million of these older PlayStations that I need to get rid of. Can you help me get rid of them and buy them from me for a low, not a decent price, but not a great price? And this guy that I know said was always thinking in terms of when you negotiated with someone culturally in the Iranian Persian culture, you would try to get the best deal. You would always try to come away making money. You would very sophisticated type of negotiation. It wasn't necessarily forward thinking, but for whatever reason, my friend or acquaintance said, sure, I'll help you get rid of them. So he bought $10 million worth of PlayStations and he ended up selling them all. He had to sell them to discount stores and everything. And this $10 million that he spent in these weeks he spent getting rid of them, he recouped the $10 million. So he didn't lose any money, but he recouped it all. And the guy that he'd done this for said thanks. And then about 9 months later, a year later, the new PlayStations came out, and which is what this guy really wanted. And the guy called him and he said, I really appreciate what you did. So here's, you can buy $20 million of these PlayStations from me and sell them. And so my acquaintance bought this $20 million in PlayStations and made $5 million or something. So the point is that he didn't do anything for this person that wanted a favor before he got what he wanted, meaning to sell these PlayStations. He did the work and then got the results. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They don't think about the fact that before you ask for something, you need to provide value. And this is what successful people do. They go out of their way to help people. They go out of their way to provide the most value. And then if they ask for something, then people feel like they need to do it and or help them. Successful attorneys will also surround themselves the most successful people. So this is one of the keys to being successful are the people that you're around. If you're in a major law firm, they're going to get access to successful and important clients. They're going to pay high rates. You're going to be surrounded by other people that have very high expectations for themselves. And you're going to get better work, the more important work, better training. And every attorney should really be, in terms of whatever you want to do, you need to do your best to be around the most successful people and attorneys because you will rise to their level. If you're around people that can pay $5,000 for a piece of your art, this is going to help. So think about these children. They're around parents and other people that are willing to spend $5,000 on a piece of art. And that's pretty good. Obviously, in Ohio, that's not the case. When you're around very successful people, they're going to help you aim higher. They're going to help you see the world from a new perspective, and they're going to help you advance and grow. And they know what's required for you to achieve those goals. I'll tell you a quick story. It's interesting. It's about Tony Robbins, and he's a successful, I don't know, a lot of people don't even know him because he's older, but he's was a very successful motivational speaker and writer and that sort of thing, and worth hundreds of millions of dollars and has been very successful. But early on in his career, he was successful, but he wasn't that successful. And someone was heading a studio or something in Los Angeles, I don't remember what it was, approached him and said, I'd like to invite you to be part of this group that we have. It's about 10 of us, and we travel all over the world and have meetings and spend time together 4 or 5 times a year or something like that. And to join this group, it's $300,000 a year, but you'll definitely get your value out of it. And it might have even been more. It might have been like 500,000. And at the time, Tony Robbins said to this guy, this is absolutely ridiculous. Why would I spend that much money? I have all my own work to do and things to do. I really appreciate the invitation. And the guy was someone that Tony Robbins really looked up to. And he said, this is what for you may be one of the most important decisions you ever make, because when you get involved with this group of people, it's going to change your perspective about everything and will make you much more successful. And so Tony Robbins joined it, and he said that even though it was difficult for him even to come up with that much money. On short notice, he joined it and said it was like the best money that helped him become extremely successful because he was surrounded by all of these people that were successful and had high expectations for themselves. So you're around successful people. Example, Ohio versus Malibu, 3.0s are not good enough. ACTs aren't good enough. You need to apply to more than one school. And when you're around people like that are talking constantly about their goals and what is required to reach those goals, you're going to start seeing the world in a similar way. And you're going to start achieving more than you might otherwise if you weren't around other people that had very high goals and expectations for themselves. So it's just incredibly important that you get around that you can. The more successful people you're around, the better people you're around, the more you're going to advance. My dad, for example, for college, he went to Harvard, and then he became some point an admissions representative and of the school. So I was young, I was 7th grade or 6th grade or whatever, and maybe even younger than that. And I started hearing about how I needed the certain SAT scores how I need to create recommendations, how I need to take certain AP classes, the scores I would need, how I would need to be president of a class or club, and all and sports and all these things. And it was very interesting. And I did all of this. I worked very hard to do that. Just for example, the SAT, like I would take practice tests and be like, this isn't good enough. I need to get another 100 points. And I would do and study and get up there. And so I ended up getting the SAT score I needed. And then I needed to do all these different things. I need to be president of this and president of that. So I was able to be president of a class and then just all these sorts of things that I wouldn't probably have done just on my own. I wouldn't have been that motivated to increase my score to get in these to do these things. So I worked very hard to do this. And I was at a school, like at a prep school, where I was surrounded by people that were all talking about how they were going to do this and that and how successful they were going to become. And everybody knew like this person, everybody's different levels of motivation. People knew who had we already people knew what the people would do. They knew they'd be doctors. They knew they'd be this. And the people did have these goals became exactly what they said they were going to do. And everyone was very competitive about their goals, about what they were going to achieve. And in this particular school, even today, I receive calls and updates from people, and I walk up and I talk to them, and they just start telling me how successful they are, or how some other person's very successful. And it creates envy. There's people, everyone's still competitive with one another, even though you graduated from high school like 35, whatever, a long time ago. But the point is, when you're surrounded by successful people, they're going to push you to become better and to do as well as possible. And I have three daughters. One of them went to a very competitive private school, and she goes to University of Chicago now. And I have another daughter that didn't want to go to a private school, and she goes to a public school in Malibu. And the people around her aren't, the majority of them are not interested in going to great colleges. They are interested in being models. They're interested in all these different things, but they're certainly the goals that they're setting are not the same as someone would at a competitive private school in Los Angeles. They're just different. And so what does that mean? Think about that. So early in life, people are set up basically often by the people they're surrounded by. If you work at a lousy law firm, not a great law firm, people talk negatively about certain practice areas like insurance defense and different types of firms. You're going to have your success often is going to be determined, or how good of an attorney you are, by the type of people that you're around. A not so good law firm is you'll be able to turn and work with typos, and you may not have to work very hard. The clients may not expect much. All these sorts of things. You're not going to be surrounded often by the most successful people, and that can hurt you. And so you need to be very careful. Who am I surrounding myself by? So you always want to be around the most successful people. And just it's interesting for me to think about my two daughters. One, my daughter that went to a competitive private high school. I don't know, there may be 75 or 80 kids in her class. I think two went to Yale, Williams, like Duke, Dartmouth, like all these great schools. And probably more than half her class went to top 25 colleges. And it's incredible. So the people that you're around and their goals have so much to do with success. And if you're at a much better law firm, you're going to have the work quality is going to be important. You're going to have certain things are going to be required that wouldn't be in smaller law firms, and the quality of work you're going to do, and you're going to get better and become a more effective attorney. I'm not just talking about being in like the best law firms, for example, like a AmLaw 100 law firm. It could also be if you're doing personal injury work. It could also be if you're doing immigration or trust in estates. Every firm, every practice area has people that are the best. And so you should always be trying to work with the best people. And that's extremely important. I hear all the time that firms won't consider attorneys from different law firms. A lot of firms will tell me if they have a labor employment opening, they will tell me they want labor and employment. They do not want people from certain firms. And they'll say, for example, they don't want people from Jackson Lewis, which is a great firm. They want people from other top AM law firms. And they'll just say that people that they believe from certain firms will have poor work habits. And they say that they don't think through work carefully enough. And they think they will treat typos and things as embarrassing, but just not completely unacceptable. An attorney from a major law firm turning in a brief or something with typos in it it's just It doesn't happen as frequently as it would from people from other environments. And people have to have standards. The environment that you're in will have standards. The people that you're working with will have standards. And so you rise off into the level of the standards. Is that true? Yes, of course there. For example, with the different firms, people will pick up habits that are when they're not always around the highest performing people. And I often know when I'm working with people where they're most likely to get hired. People will get hired. Often the law firms will evaluate lateral candidates, especially the best ones, based on the quality of work and things that they believe that the attorneys from these other firms, from the best firms had. They'll avoid people where they believe that they might have gotten bad habits, and they'll want people with certain levels of expectations for what they do. When I was in college, this is a sad story, actually, and I hate talking about it, but it's true, and it's actually tragic. But there were a couple of students I knew from small towns, and within a short period of time, I remember one of them was a really nice guy from Oklahoma, and he had been the top student in his high school class and had a lot of potential. But even that, he said he'd never done any homework when he had any homework when he was in school. And so he got to University of Chicago, and he was getting like C's and D's and unable to keep up with the work. He started drinking and having all these issues, and there was another one, similar thing, and dropped out of school. And so these people had not grown up with people with the highest expectations. They'd just done well. They had not been conditioned in environments that would have demanded the same level of effort and performance as a high pressure college, and they didn't have the same skills and habits and didn't do well. And it's actually sad. The one guy I'm thinking about from Oklahoma, he failed out of University of Chicago and ended up eventually killing himself, which was very sad. Yeah, but so if you want to be at the top of your game, you need to surround yourself with the most successful people. So who are you spending your time with? Who are you trying to work with? And if you're around those sorts of people, then that will help you get to that level. And you really need to work as hard as you possibly can to keep up with the most successful people. And the more competitive the environment you get into, the higher you're going to go, and it's just never going to stop. So if you stay and do well in a prestigious firm, you'll be able to move to a better one. If you can move into a more prestigious firm or a firm that's better in your practice area, you're going to do better. If you're able to work with important attorneys in your practice area, as opposed to someone that's average, you'll probably do better. If you're able to work with larger clients, people that are representing larger clients, you'll probably do better. But the important thing to remember if you want to work in law firms and you want to be successful there, that you're going to be more successful in the long run if you're able to work in the best possible firms. And that's just how it works. If that's what you want to do and work in the largest clients, or maybe you want to do, again, mass torts or something. But the point I guess I want to make real quickly is that the kids from Ohio were not going out of state or to prestigious and well-regarded schools, and that was okay. Even the class valedictorian was going to a nursing school. And I'm guessing that even if some of these kids tried to go to these prestigious schools, they probably wouldn't get a very warm reception from them. So the best colleges and graduate schools typically will want people from the best high schools and the most competitive. They will know that these kids are likely to do much better. They will know that they've been surrounded by other people with high expectations and will do the best. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you trying to get close to? What are you doing how are you doing that? Because you need to be around the most successful people in order to succeed. Everything is about your ability to network into the best groups. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you can't get into a law firm, you can join associations, you can do whatever you can, but you need to be around the most successful people. That will help you advance and get better. The best attorneys are also exclusionary and not exclusionary. The most high school, when I'm talking about a few high school graduate parties of the school that I went to, I remember he would keep his graduation invitations in his car for weeks. So he'd only send out like a few each day. I don't know. He was very calculating, but he would invite some people and then not invite others right away and then invite them later. And I asked him why he did this, and he explained that he didn't want everyone that he was inviting to this party to automatically assume they were inviting. He wanted to control the timing of the invitations. So people, it was just a psychological game, I guess. But this kind of psychological war game, when you're keeping people on edge, not making obvious people feel included in things, is the sort of games that the best attorneys do. At the school I went to, the athletes had their own parties, and it was almost like a popularity contest to get to these parties. The parents of these different parties weren't always the most welcoming. So they weren't welcoming other parents, and they were somewhat exclusionary in their social circles as well. And then one of the parties I remember was hosted by one of the top 2 or 3 executives from General Motors, and the same thing. All the only parents there were the most successful parents and their counterparts, and people that are doing incredibly well. And again, the parents of the middle to lower class children weren't invited. Same thing with when you think about the parents of the small town. So everybody's invited, everyone socializing with the same people, and the same issues exist but this particular group in Ohio was inclusive and not exclusionary, whereas my private high school was exclusionary and not inclusionary. This is actually very important to understand. So the highest performing people will often exclude rather than include. And anything that's exclusive and hard to get into creates envy, and envy drives people to improve. If you're in trying to be a very high achiever in the legal profession, then you will be often excluded. But when you get into certain environments, those will be environments that are not necessarily welcoming and not easy to get into. And people in Malibu are playing all these sort of social games. You're not necessarily going to connect with everyone. People are sizing each other up. People are part of different groups and certain groups compared to Ohio stuff. And all this is just a game. These games are just things that make people often feel excluded, unhappy with competitive people. And so this is something that you need to understand happens in law firms. Law firms are exclusionary, different groups are exclusionary. And it's almost like the higher you get in legal profession, or the farther you're trying to go, the more exclusionary things are going to get. And so my wife later asked me, a family who knew the boy's parents, what was going on, or because the one I talked to you about that passed out in the room where they were querying for a sink. And they explained that a lot of the kids at the party, excuse me, I'm just fixing some of my hair, sorry. The kids at the party didn't like him, and that he was probably upset that the parents were hosting a party at his house. So he felt disconnected, not excluded at his own party at his house. And there's a lot of pressure to be part of groups that are exclusive. There's safety for people to be in groups that are inclusive rather than exclusive. And people that don't feel part of something exclusive will often feel safer when they're in communities and things where they feel like they belong as if they don't belong. For several times, I'd taken yoga classes from this girl from Iowa who came to Los Angeles to try to be an actress. And most people that come to Los Angeles trying to be actresses do not succeed, despite what they think. And after concluding that she couldn't do it, she became a yoga teacher, read all these motivational books, seminars, struggled to pay her rent and to keep up with everything, and then concluded eventually that she felt disconnected in LA. Everything she tried to do, people excluded her. She didn't feel like she fit in, and she couldn't make enough money. And this frustrated her. And then she just gave up and returned to Iowa. And so a lot of attorneys, same thing. If you are practicing inside of a large law firm, you may not be happy. You're often in an environment that is exclusionary rather than inclusionary. You don't feel that you're going to be able to be a partner. There's different groups that are excluding you. People are playing games with you. And everyone's playing games. And you're feeling excluded. You may feel excluded socially. You may feel excluded from certain types of work. You may feel excluded from people that have power. All these sorts of things are what are going on. And the more competitive the environment you're in, the more exclusionary things are going to be. And you have to be comfortable with that. The highest levels of the legal profession are extremely exclusionary. They create stress. They're not pleasant. The best firms are very difficult to get into. The best firms are also extremely hard to advance in, and they're exclusionary. And so if you want to be a good attorney, though, you need to be comfortable and understand that you're trying to get into exclusionary elite environments and things that aren't necessarily welcoming. And the more welcoming you want a firm to be to you, the less exclusionary it's going to be, and often the less it's not going to be as good of a firm with the best clients. The best attorneys also will hold the belief that the future is going to give them something much better than today. They do not think that they're at the top of their game like the kids graduating in Ohio. And the kids graduating in Ohio were thinking that they've done something great, that this is one of the times where they're going to be the happiest, going to these local schools and not necessarily having major goals and not even knowing what they're going to be doing. These kids in Malibu were thinking about doing incredibly high levels of achievement. They wanted to become something really good. They were going out, they were going all over the country. They want to be more successful. And if they don't feel like they're as successful as they could be at the moment, they believe they have excuses for that and why they're going to be successful. And it's the same thing with attorneys that are really good. They're always believe that they're going to get better. They're going to do better in the next case. They're going to get a better employer. They're going to improve as a person. They're trying to learn. They're never going to stop learning. They read and then they do all these sorts of things to become something more than they're going to be today. And they believe that the future that they have is much better than today. So if I call a good attorney working in a prestigious law firm and tell them I have an opportunity in an even more prestigious law firm, it's always interesting to me because people will actually take that quite seriously. They will hear what I have to say, and they will often, a large percentage of the time, be interested in it. Whereas if it wasn't as good of a firm, they wouldn't. But successful attorneys are always trying to get into the best environments. And they will obviously be happy in a lot of environments and stay, but are often motivated to do well. They want information about how they can do better. And they're constantly like looking for feedback. I guess kind of the main point is I've talked to you a little bit today about class, race, socioeconomic backgrounds, and it's not necessarily something that makes people happy to hear that the people that you grow up with can impact your success, and the people that you spend your time with can impact your success, and your ability to be part of exclusionary environments as opposed to inclusionary environments, and to strive for that is a key to success. But what I do know is that people that strive to do better, achieve more, will also always surround themselves with those sorts of people. And the people that you surround yourself are going to inspire you to set even higher expectations than the ones you're around already have, and to do better in the profession. The people who are content to settle on being medical. One of the reasons that people try to go to the best schools and to work in the best firms. In a school, it doesn't matter where you went to college, you're probably going to learn fairly similar things. The only difference being the students that you're learning with. The students that you're learning with at Yale are going to be different than the students that you're learning with at Michigan State. They're going to have different goals. They're going to have different ways of thinking about the world. Some people at Yale are going to want to go into finance and private equity and Wizards of Wall Street. People from Michigan State may become packaging engineers. I don't know, but the people that you're around will affect how you do. It's never too late to try to network with better people. People that go to New York are often the work can be much more demanding in certain firms there than it would be different places in the Midwest and the clients. And it's so important to understand all this because these rules that I talked about today will really determine your success. And you need to realize that if you want to be successful, you need to put your thermostat higher. You need to have very high expectations for yourself. You need to think, if you write down what you're doing now, could you ask yourself, like, what would the most successful person in my practice area be doing right now in my age? What would they be doing that other people aren't doing? But people don't do that. They just act like employees, or they don't have high goals for themselves, or they expect things to be given to them. And if you are able to commit to something and believe in yourself, and you really do that, and you're willing to fight for the ups and downs, you're willing to try to get the best of every transaction of everything you're doing, then you're going to be very successful. And what I do, legal recruiting, is it's very difficult to find people that are good that do it because it's just not easy. You have to have very high expectations for what people, you have to believe in people that other people don't believe. And I don't necessarily have a negative view of the legal profession. What I'm trying to talk to you about, or what I've talked to you about, is what you need to be, your mindset and the ways you need to think about things if you're going to be successful. And incredibly important. There's all sorts of people that I can help and that I do. But the more people that that I've helped, the more I've realized that this sort of belief in people is helpful. There's another thing I just wanted to bring up too. It's when I talk to the most successful attorneys, because I've been doing this for 25 years, there are people that I started working with 25 years ago that even back then had very large goals for themselves, wanted to go far, were and often didn't come out of the best schools, didn't have the best backgrounds, were often unemployed. And but those people that believe in themselves and kept believing in themselves and kept pushing all became successful. Very few of them didn't. In people that were in good environments, I would say more than half of them with the highest expectations didn't become as successful because they didn't have this sort of belief in themselves. And I guess a final point that I want to make too is everybody around you is trying to push you down. So your peers are trying to push you down. The environments you're in, the law firms will often push you down. They're trying to make as much money as they can off you. The people are often the clients are trying to get the best deal possible. People are competitive with you. People will try to intimidate you, make you feel badly about yourself. So every attorney really is getting pushed down a lot. And it's a very difficult profession to have self-confidence in because all these different things are pushing you down. You feel limited by your law school, by your practice here, by your location, by what you're doing. All these things are pushing you down. And so if you're going to be successful, you need to have a mindset that doesn't allow all this to push you down, that helps you maintain your confidence and make sure you don't get pushed, make sure you don't get discouraged because most people get discouraged. The majority of attorneys are discouraged and don't feel the sort of passion that they should and don't have the drive and aren't achieving what they could because they're getting pushed down by other people. They're surrounding themselves with the wrong people. They're not surrounding themselves with people that are trying to do the best. They're not pushing themselves to do better. They're just not in that situation. So the majority of people, like when I say the majority, I would say at least 75% of people, maybe more, are just operating at maybe 50% of what they could be if they really buckled down and set high goals for themselves and tried to surround themselves with the right people, had things that were must and not should. I must do this to achieve. I must do this. I must bring in this number of clients and this amount of work. I must get a job by that. These are what the most successful people do. And you need to find that mindset and you need to have it because if you don't, you're not going to do anywhere near what you could. And there's nothing wrong with not being a super successful attorney. I'm not saying that there is, but there is something wrong when you allow your background or your ways of thinking to consciously limit you in terms of what you could be doing, because you could be a very happy, successful, respected attorney whose family respects them, who's respecting the community, who has done well financially, that enjoys what you do, or you could be the opposite, someone that isn't doing well, that doesn't have pride in themselves, that feels beaten down, that never feels like things are going to improve for them, that has given up trying, that has lost hope. Those are your options. And unfortunately, most people are the ones that are not happy and aren't really reaching everything that they're capable of doing. And most of the time, it's just because of how they think. It's nothing more how you think and the people that you surround yourself with. Okay, so thank you. We'll take a short break. And then when I come back, we'll just like 1 or 2 minutes, we'll do questions. This is a live webinar. So questions are the most, in my opinion, the most important part of the webinar because you can ask about what I've talked about, but most of the time people ask just questions you've been thinking about related to your career, getting ahead, what problems you're having, being unemployed, being in a job you don't like, feeling like you're limited somehow, overcoming different obstacles. So all these sorts of things I love answering questions about, and typically those can help a lot of people. And when you do ask questions, you're helping people that come along in the future that could use the input on these same matters. And there's the only reason that I'm able to answer these questions the way I do is just because I've been seeing all this for 25 years. And many times I can help you quite a bit just with one answer, often change the direction of your career if you think about things the right way. So we're back in 1 minute, and then when I come back, we'll do questions. And again, I encourage everyone to stick around for questions because it honestly it often is the most important part of the webinar. Thank you. But I just really do commend you for spending time watching these sorts of things because it's tremendously valuable information. And I've been doing these webinars, I don't know how many years, but every week I'd get people messaging me on LinkedIn and things saying that just one little thing that they watched or something, or they watched from a webinar and it changed how they thought about things, and they've reached these really, they've become extremely successful, they're happy, or sometimes people quit law because of what I said. They say I inspired them to. But watching these sorts of things is just very helpful. Any type of self-improvement you can do. But this particular sort of thing, like learning about your career and being able to ask questions, is incredibly important because you can learn secrets. Some people just do this stuff naturally, others don't. But I think it's important to learn. Okay, let's go to the first question. Extremely important to learn. Okay, this looks like a fun question. It's long. Oh my goodness, this is too big. Sorry, give me a second. I was fired from my last associate position, a small civil litigation firm. The only other attorney was a firm owner who was pretty hands-off and blindly trusted support staff in a lot of things. They, in large part because the support staff disliked me and started sabotaging me. They never seemed to accept I was another attorney that could give them instructions. I wasn't asking anything crazy. It was basic things like me asking them to enter notes in the case management software so that I could supervise what they were doing. Was it my fault for not being better at politely coaxing, cajoling, flattery to get them to do basic things? Or was I just screwed from the start from accepting a position in a badly run law firm? So the first thing is most attorneys will get fired at least once in their career. Certainly it doesn't happen to everybody, but if you joined a firm and the staff doesn't like you, then that can hurt you. So obviously the things that a lot of attorneys don't understand is that it's actually just as important to make sure any staff, whoever you're dealing with, secretaries, paralegals, word processing, that they like you just as much, if not more, than partners and things you may be working with. And the reason for that is because the partners are the ones that hired them usually that are working for them, and the partners give information to the partners. If someone doesn't like you, they tell other people. They don't look out for you. They don't. Good staff members will correct your mistakes. They will make sure you don't make mistakes. They will rescue you from problems. And so making people that are staff in any firm is honestly one of the most important things. You have to be nice to them. You have to remember birthdays. You have to go out of your way to make them feel good about themselves and valued. And so when you do that, the staff will help you. And when you don't have a good relationship with the staff, they're going right to the people that are employing you. I don't know what happened at your particular job, but I would just tell everyone that having the staff like you is extremely important because they will look out for you and they will help you. And people don't realize that, and they will also hurt you a lot if they don't like them. But whatever happening when you got fired, I really wouldn't worry too much about it. Everyone gets fired. The most important thing is just if you get fired, to try to get another job as quickly as you can. And it's also very common with solo practitioners and small firms that the partner that they're working for is unhappy with them. And a lot of times solo practitioners will rotate through all sorts of different associates and people won't stay and they'll have problems. So you're being successful in a law firm isn't necessarily about who you don't have to worry about getting fired too much. If you think you're going to get fired, you always want to be able to look for another job before you get fired, find something before quitting. But I wouldn't worry too much unless you were doing something really badly here. I don't know what it was, but you get fired. I wouldn't worry too much about it. But one thing I would say is people do not fire people most of the time that they like. So if someone likes you and they think that you're trying very hard, they're less likely to fire you than if they don't like you. So you need to be likable, and then you need to try your hardest to do the best work you can and just get everyone to like you. This is actually a very important point. And this is, for me, so I talk to law firm partners that I'm working with all day, every day. I talk to associates, I talk to all these people, and I talk to people that have a lot of times before talking to me have gone out on like multiple interviews and not gotten jobs and have gotten fired from where they're working and having problems. But one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you when you're working for anybody, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, but I think is extremely important, is whoever is giving you work or has work, giving you work or has work is your client. So that's it. So if you're working for one partner and that person's giving you work, that's your client. If it's your client, if you have your own client, you're going to do what that client wants. You're going to work the hardest. You're going to want to keep that client's business. You're going to respect the client because that client is paying you for your work. And so if you were representing someone in a case, you would think about that person as your client. You would work as hard as you could. You would do the best job you could. You would want to keep that person as your client because they're paying you money. And so this is something that a lot of attorneys don't think about. Your client, you have two clients, but your main client is the person that's giving you work. So when you're working for someone else and they have work for you to do, that's your client. And so you may work in a firm with 10 partners and getting work from each of them. Each of those partners is your client. You need to respect them. You need to work the way they want. You need to anticipate their needs. You need to make them like you, because if you don't, they're not going to keep you around. What happens in a lot of, it's interesting, but I want you to just think about it this way. I was working, the second firm I worked in was this firm called Dewey Ballantyne that's no longer in existence. And Dewey Ballantyne did not have a ton of work in litigation. I came from Quinn Emanuel, where there was even more work than you can imagine. There was just too much, there was way too much work, and which was good. But at the same time, so I went to this Dewey Ballantyne, and there were maybe 10 litigation partners in the firm, maybe fewer than that, and not enough work going around. What would happen is people would do work for someone and you would do the best possible work you could so you could get repeat work. So everyone was very competitive, and you would work for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different partners and hopefully get work from a lot of them, and they would talk positively about you and more people would give you work. But if you did work that was bad for one partner, then maybe that partner had friends, and so those friends wouldn't use you. And so you would lose 2 potential clients because you didn't do a good job with one client. So the goal of all the people, the associates and things that were litigating there, was to get hours and to make sure that they were solicitous and doing the best work they possibly could for the partners there. And there were people that pissed off one partner and that partner badmouthed them to other partners. And so they suddenly didn't have any work. There were people that didn't have enough work and didn't have important work because they weren't getting repeat business. In a law firm, your ability to do good work, who's ever given you work, is important, and you need to maintain that client. And that's your whole goal. You need to keep that client. So if you're working for one person, that's really dangerous, because if that client doesn't like you, then you will lose your job. But if you're working for 10 different people and one doesn't like you, then you probably won't lose your job. And so your goal is really to keep getting more and more clients. You're in a big firm, you want all the partners to talk positively about you that you're doing work for. You want them to continually give you work to do. Because the other rule is, in the legal profession, which a lot of people don't understand, but this is very important, when you run out of work, you die. So what does that mean? When you run out of work, you die. So when you run out of work, that means if no one's giving you legal work to do, whether it's a client or a firm or wherever you're at, you die. So I'm not saying your career is over, but you are in trouble. Anytime you run out of work, you're in big trouble. So you always need to have work coming in. One of the reasons I don't like it when people go in-house, and that's so dangerous, is because when you go out in-house, you're dependent on one client. If that client decides to sell themselves and merge into another company, if they go out of business, if whatever, you're going to run out of work and you're going to lose your job, which happens probably 60% of the time. Someone that goes in-house from a law firm will lose their job within 2 years, and they may get into another in-house job. It depends on what their skill set and stuff, but more than half the time, there's some period of unemployment. So when you run out of work, you die. So why is it you go into a large law firm and you work there for 10 years and you know you're not going to make partner because you're going to run out of work at some point and they're going to ask you to leave if you don't have business. If you become a non-equity partner and you don't generate business in a certain period of time, your career is going to die. So you always are trying to make sure you have work coming in. The only way to be successful in the legal profession as an attorney often is to set yourself up wherever you are to continually have access to more and more work. And for most people, that means getting their own clients. That's the way to think about it, because if you're dependent on others for your work, that's just like a really scary thing. So people will you have to go into situations and put yourself into situations where you always have work. Because again, I've seen so many careers end when people run out of work, and you need to always have work to do. So I just want to put that in the back of your mind to any employment. Another thing I've seen is like all these government attorneys, when this stuff with Doge or whatever, Elon Musk and laying off government workers, I don't know exactly, but I saw like in a period of time, hundreds, if not thousands of attorneys that were losing their jobs in the government and ran out of work. So they were working in the government. They were there for 5, 6 years, 10 years, and they ran out of work, and then boom, everything's over. So I mean, they lose their job. I'm sure they find other ones, but it's not easy. So you always want to make sure that you have access to work. Every career move you make, you need to think about having access to work. Everything you do is about access to work. So you could move to a smaller market, but there's a lot of work there. You could start your own firm. If you think you can get clients, you can go to a firm that has more work than where you're at and needs senior people. But so many people run out of work. And that's who I talk to every day. I talk to people that are unemployed, or I talk to people that are in firms that don't have any work for them to do. I talk all these sorts of things. And so your whole goal as an attorney is to always have access to work. And you need to realize that you're going to have more and more access to work the better you do with treating the people that you're working with as clients and making them like you. And then the more the more work you're constantly able to get. So you always need to have access to work. And when they're evaluating associates to be partners, a lot of times, I remember I had this crazy conversation. It was with, and I'll never forget it, but I was quitting this Quinn Emanuel and going to work at this Dewey Ballantyne, and someone was asking me like, why are you, I don't know, they were trying to talk me into staying. And I said, I was upset because this one person I know didn't make partner. And they said that person only billed, I don't know what the number was, but it was something like that person only billed 2,600 or 26 or 2,700 hours. And the person we made partner made 3,200, billed 3,200 hours. And so that should be self-explanatory for you, meaning they chose the person to be a partner. They had a couple options, and they chose the person that billed the most hours. But why do hours matter in a law firm? Hours actually say a lot. So there's no thing that goes and evaluates how responsive people, I mean, they can certainly do different types of performance reviews and things inside of law firms, but really often the best gauge of the quality of work you're doing is how many hours you're able to bill, because people are giving you work. So if there's one firm, somebody may be billing 3,000 hours, the other might be billing 1,200 hours. When I was at Quinn Emanuel, I remember there were a couple of people on my floor that were hardly billing anything, like 1,200 hours, 1,100 hours, whatever. And I was on track for 3,000. And so the people that do the best work are the ones that get more work. And so you always want to understand that your hours are a function that other people are giving you work and you're doing a good job. Okay, but it's not saying that it's human. You can do it do it forever. We don't want to, and most people don't. But even if you want to, and that's what it is. But can my background or upbringing still affect how I rise in a law firm, even if I meet all of the performance benchmarks? Of course, your background and upbringing doesn't have to completely affect how you do in a law firm, because the background and upbringing is only setting the stage for what you think is important. So everybody has, I guess, a thermostat. So let's talk about that. Thermostat. So thermostat. So what does that mean? So happy and not comfortable. Okay, so everyone has a thermostat, like what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And so what does that mean exactly? So people will be comfortable often with a certain level of achievement, or they want a certain level of achievement, and people may be uncomfortable with a certain level of achievement. So what is your thermostat? What is tolerable? What is tolerable for you? And what is it that you want? So let me just give you some examples. And these are crude examples. I've seen this example applied to dating and all these sorts of things comfortable with. Okay, so let's just talk about, and I'll just show you this in a way that this is not, in many cases, isn't the greatest example, but I think is an important one. Okay, so let's say Harrison is going out and socializing. Harrison making friends. This is me. So I have some options here. I could go and I could hang out with the people that do, the people that, let's say, people that paint houses in my neighborhood. That's one option. I could hang out with my best friend, who's a retired Quinn Emanuel partner. One of my other options. Partner that I know very well, best friend. Or I could hang out with billionaires I know in Malibu with 5+ houses, obviously jets, whatever, jets, etc. So these are the people that I could be friends with, if I could try to be friends with. So I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with the people that paint houses in my neighborhood because I would go hang out with them and I would think I can do better than this. I'm not talking about the things that I'm interested in. They're just not they're not at the same level that I'm at. So I probably wouldn't be comfortable with that. I would, so let me see what, yeah, what not. And then my other option, just an example, is retired Quinn Emanuel partners. We talk about the same things, have the same experiences, economically very similar, comfortable with that person. Economically similar, education similar. Where I'm not comfortable with people that paint houses in my neighborhood because I think I need better friends in this. I need more important people that right. So I go and I'm friends with this retired Quinn Emanuel partner. Out of all the options and hundreds of people I met throughout the years, this becomes my best friend. Then the next person I could be friends with, and I run across these people all the time, are billionaires with 5+ houses and jets. One of them called me the other day, wanted to hang out, and told me that he just finished the penthouse in the Four Seasons in the very top in Nashville, and had spent $12 million on it and $7 million doing the inside, and that's where he had, and so sent me some videos of it and things, and he has a private plane and everything. And that's someone I could also be friends with. But I don't want to be friends with that person because I don't feel comfortable with that type of person. I'm certainly not a billionaire. So these people, even though I'm telling you to try to get in the best environments possible, these are people that I'm not comfortable with because frankly, they are, whatever they do, they're more economically successful. They have different types of lifestyles. And I'm certainly not the kind of person where my 10th or 15th house is a $20 million penthouse at the Four Seasons in Nashville. So people are the same way. So you will go and you will decide the type of attorneys that you want to practice with. And in most cases, you're going to choose people that you're going to be most comfortable with, people that have similar educational backgrounds, people that have worked in the same type of firms, people that have similar types of maybe socioeconomic backgrounds. All these sorts of things are what you're going to be comfortable with instead of pushing yourself and trying to be around the people that you might not be comfortable with, but trying to rise to their level. So if I decided I wanted to be friends with these billionaires, and even though I probably couldn't afford to keep up with them for their trips to Aspen, but if I did, that would probably be something that could set me up to be more successful. And I'm trying to give you a lesson to do this, and I'm not saying that I do it. I certainly associate with these people, but they're not my friends, and I'm not comfortable with that. So what happens? So what are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with the types of people that you grew up with? Are you going to allow that? Are you going to be comfortable and stay comfortable with and try to keep associated with the types of people that went to the same schools and worked in the same small firms or whatever it is? Or are you going to really push yourself into situations that you're not comfortable with? Because I'll tell you what 95% of the population does is they just go and they spend their time with people that they're comfortable with instead of pushing their thermostat. So Harrison's thermostat is about right here, comfortable with his Quinn Emanuel partner, instead of billionaires and these sorts of people. Or my thermostat thinks I'm much better than people that paint houses in my neighborhood. So I'm not going to necessarily that's not where I'm going to spend my time. So everyone has a thermostat. So just thinking about your thermostat is going to be set by often your environment. Like I talked to you about, the thermostat is much higher for people that go to private schools often than people that go to public schools. Thermostats are going to be higher for people that go to the best colleges and law schools as opposed to the ones that don't. So you go to a local law school, wherever, and people don't expect to get into these Am Law 100 law firms. They're That's just not what happens. I was talking to a woman the other day, and she was like valedictorian at a small law school and came out and was doing workers' comp. It just depends on the people that you're around. Okay. Other subtle ways law firms evaluate class during interviews, and how can I prepare that as a law student? Yes, law firms will have all sorts of ways of evaluating your that, and not all of them care, but you run across people all the time that have they belong to different clubs and they've been different hobbies and different vacations and all this. So people can tell. It's unfortunate, but people from upper, very high class type environments can evaluate people very quickly based on their habits, the way they talk, the way they carry themselves, what they talk about, what they don't talk about. So yeah, there's all sorts of subtle ways that people evaluate that during interviews. And there's a lot of books on this sort of thing, but it's not necessarily something that you need to worry too much about. What I would say is in most cases, people are not as concerned about your class and things. They're concerned about your ability to work hard and want to get ahead and provide them value and treat them like a client and do the best work you can. Okay, let's see. How do I break into my firm's inner circle if I didn't come from an elite law school or social background? So to get into an elite circle in your law firm, it doesn't necessarily matter where you, if you're in a firm and you didn't go to an elite law school or go to the best social background, people are ultimately going to advance people that do the best work, work the hardest, provide the most value, and then make other people feel good about themselves, make other people feel important, good about themselves. So those are, I guess, those are the main things that I would tell you. So if you're asking how to break into that, this is what's most important. People are not as concerned. The social background stuff does matter, and it is important. But ultimately, the people that do the best work and provide the most value are the ones that get ahead. So that could mean you get more clients, you have more stylers and things. So ultimately, everything matters in terms of that, but it's not as important as you would think. When is the best time to start applying for summer associate positions, and how early is too early? So if you're going to school out of state, say I went to University of Virginia and I thought about working in Detroit when I got out of school. So I applied to some big firms in Detroit to be a summer associate, literally during my first semester. And when I went back at summer for the summer, I mean, for my Christmas break, a couple law firms took me out to lunch, which was nice. So and I didn't get a summer associate position with them, but they told me to contact them after I graduated, after I got my first semester grades. But so that's one way to do it if you're from out of town. But if you're trying to get a job as a second year summers after your second summer, which is the most important and for most people, then you start applying in the early fall for those jobs. Then it's extremely important for law students, just people don't often realize this, but you're much more likely to get a good job when you graduate if you work in the summer in a law firm, hopefully both summers, because it shows a commitment to that practice setting. Some people work in the government and things, and it becomes extremely difficult comparatively than if you worked in a law firm. So everyone should try to work in a law firm during their first and second summers. And honestly, if you don't think you can get one that pays for whatever reason, even if you are getting paid minimum wage, it's like one of the most important things you can possibly get on your resume to get a job when you graduate. Extremely important. So if people have the ability to do that, or you definitely want to try that. Or try to do it. Okay, thanks, by the way, for all these questions. There's a lot of questions today, which is great. Okay, when you've had a setback, i.e. let go from a big firm that took a job at a boutique firm to keep the lights on, should you try to go back into a big firm, big law, or see the writing on the wall and just succeed at the smaller place? What's your experience? People get let go from large law firms all the time. You may get let go because of something you did wrong, something you said. There could be all sorts of reasons, and people make mistakes. At the age of 25, you can practice law easily until you're in your 80s, which is at least 55 years. So just losing a job very early in your career, if you're thinking about a career that's going to go at least another 50 years, you shouldn't really worry too much about it. It doesn't have anything to do with your whole future. And this is the problem here in the way people are thinking. So it's good that you actually took another job when you lost your job at a boutique firm because, like I said earlier, the most important thing is to always have access to work. So should you try to get back big law, or you should just see the writing on the wall? No, there's no writing on the wall. So just because you didn't do well at one large law firm doesn't mean you're not going to do well at another. Different law firms have different cultures, different law firms have different types of work, different law firms have different types of partners with different types of problems and not problems, different type. There's a million different things that will determine whether or not you're going to be happy in a law firm. So in a big firm, no, you shouldn't not think you should go back into big law. You can learn your lesson and go back to big law if that's what you want to do. The benefits of working in big law compared to a boutique are typically the clients are going to be able to spend more money. So on the attorneys, so the work is going to have to be of higher quality. You'll be able to do more, they'll go into more depth of problems. Whereas if you're working in a smaller law firm where the clients aren't as deep pocketed, you're not going to be pushed to do work of the same quality. And having the better the firm you have on your resume early in your career, it can help you, but people move all the times from small firms to medium firms to large firms. It just depends what you're trying to do. But no, you should never. I've seen attorneys get into large law firms after having worked in small law firms for 25 years. So you can always move to a large law firm. There's no just because you lost your job doesn't mean your career is in trouble. Okay, to what extent do our legal professionals open to seeking and staying with mental health care is stigmatized? Everybody that feels like you need mental health care should go see a therapist. It's like the best use of your money possible. If insurance provider, it's very smart. You need someone to talk to about your problems constantly each week, and having someone like that to talk to will allow you to reflect and see yourself. And through that, will help you alleviate stress. It'll give you something to look forward to talk about your week and to get and talk about your problems, whether they're personal or work related. So everybody that can afford it and has the time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with talking to a therapist, or some people will get coaches, just whatever you want. But absolutely, everyone should do that. Is there stigma to it? Yep, there is. So anytime someone says, it depends on where you're at. In California, probably hardly any. It's almost like a badge of honor, but I don't know about with attorneys. But anytime you're working in a law firm for a client, you never want to reveal weakness. If you reveal weakness, people will use it against you. So what does that mean? Talking about going to a therapist is revealing weakness, and people can use that against you. Talking about having drinking problem, drug problem, relationship problems, do all these sorts of things. These are weaknesses, and people will use weaknesses against you. So you never talk about therapy, you never talk about anything with your peers or your superiors, because they will use that against you. You typically, if you get diagnosed with a horrible disease you're still able to work and it's not creating any issues, but don't reveal that either. You just keep everything private, because if you reveal weaknesses, it's going to hurt you. But yeah, everyone, if you can, you should definitely do what you can to see a therapist or a coach or support groups, and that sort of thing can be very helpful. So I'm reading a question. Okay, this question. Watch a lot of your videos, you're super thorough. You actually went over my resume super intensely in a prior resume review for the whole team in the webinar. My question is, I did a lot of job changing, and my experience is not an area that I like, insurance defense. How can I change fields, even career paths? Like, I'm interested in in-house counsel work or entertainment law, or to be an event planner. How can I get out of insurance defense when it's primarily on my resume? So if you dislike what you're doing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing something else. Some people like insurance defense, others don't. You could potentially move from insurance defense to commercial litigation, or you could just do something different altogether. Sometimes people that don't like their practice area, like insurance defense, will often investigate. You could start a trust and estates firm, a family law firm. You could go to work in another practice area. Anytime you are trying to work in another practice area, the smartest thing you can do is to look for smaller firms or individuals doing that type of work and then learn from them. So that would be one thing if you don't like your practice area. But if you've been changing job, anybody that's been changing jobs a lot and not feeling fulfilled when you're doing that, I don't think that's a good use of your life force, because everyone has things that they can do. I have yet to meet someone that doesn't have some innate skill that they're interested, or something that really piques their interest and makes them get some enthusiastic. It could be anything. It could be, like you said, maybe being an event planner. People are going to be more successful, and you'll be happier and more successful. And anybody, this goes for everybody watching this. If you don't like practicing law, or you're not excited about it, and you don't want to constantly improve and put yourself in to do whatever you can to be the best, and you like it, if you're not like that and you think that there's something else that would get you excited, then you should be doing that. So people should be, and this is an important point, and I want to make sure you understand it. You should be going to work each day, and you should be excited about the future. So if you're an associate in a law firm, like your first 4 or 5 years, like you're learning how to do something, but you should be excited about, one day I'm going to have clients. One day I'm going to do this. One day I'm going to be even better at my job. One day I'm going to do all these great things. You should be excited about that. That should give you excitement. You should be able to go into work each day after a certain number of years and think, I really like this. I'm very blessed to be doing this. And you may have changed jobs, but you like what you're doing. The work you do should make you more excited about life, and then, or should give you energy and power. If your work doesn't give you energy and power, and all it does is take it, and you don't think that being in a position years from now where you have your own clients, or where you're doing something, is not going to give you that, then you should try to do something else. You need to think through it, but you should try to do something else. Entertainment law, I don't know why you would think that would be. Entertainment laws, contracts, and little, I don't know why that would be interesting to you, other than the people that you'd be working with, or in-house counsel, why that would be interesting to you if you don't like what you're doing. So there's nothing wrong with changing careers, and people do it all the time, and they can become incredibly successful and very fulfilled doing anything. You could be an event planner and do extremely well financially. You could huge company doing. You could do all these different things. And if you want to get out of insurance defense, then you have to try to find people that will train you in another practice area, which means finding solo practitioners and small firms that may have just regular types of litigation or something else you want to do. But you need to do something that makes you happy. And I hope that helps you, because there are a lot of people that make the mistake of sticking with something, not going to something that makes them passionate. I was practicing when I was at Quinn Emanuel. There's this guy that was extremely interested in pinball machines. I don't know, it was the tops that go on pinball machines. It was the different backdrops, the different types of pinball machines. And he was very successful. He was like 8 or 9 years out of law school, but he turned that into a business and quit practicing law, in a great business, like this great national business working with pinball machines. So you can do all sorts of things, and it doesn't mean you have to practice law. It's something, and that guy had a passion for it. So you have to have a passion for something. There are a lot of jobs I did not list on my resume that were super short term. Is that okay? Yeah, if you have a job that's, I'm not saying telling you to do something unethical, but I will tell you that a lot of people do that. And I think it's better not, if you have a short-term job, not listing that than listing it if it's a month or something. That's not good. But again, this is the same person that asked this question up here. If you're taking all these short-term jobs and you're unhappy wherever you are, you're probably not in a good situation. Why wouldn't you be doing a career and trying to make a living in something that you like, and that you're not having all these issues? And why would you worry about practicing law if you're in that position? It's so many people are unhappy in the profession because they just don't like it. And maybe it's working for other people they don't like. People can start their own firms. Maybe it's just the environment of a law firm. Maybe you want to have your own, I don't know, but you have to think about it. Yeah, before law school, I was pretty alpha, highly driven, constantly producing, and very creative, much like the rich kid type you described. During law school, I became far more risk averse, and I've noticed that being cautious tends to keep you out of trouble. By contrast, some friends who didn't go to law school are more demanding and seem to get what they want without putting too much effort. I wonder if returning to a more sort of confident approach might actually serve me better. Yeah, I don't know what's happened with you specifically, but I think a lot of people do lose confidence in law school because your arguments are cut down, your grades aren't often as good, you're working with other very competitive people. People are falling into thinking like lawyers and all these things, and employers often will value those things compared to that. But there are people that are extremely confident. They start personal injury firms, all these different things. And maybe your friends who didn't go to law school are doing much better because of that confidence. Having confidence just depends on the environment that you're with, the people you're working with. And it's the best type of confidence is typically clients want confidence. Clients want to feel like you're very confident, but when people are giving you work, they want to feel like you're confident getting it done, but they don't want to see overconfidence. That can also hurt you. And if you have overconfidence, then people will push you down. So I think that's one of the things that young lawyers and even law students realize very early on is that when they have a lot too much confidence, that people will always be able to cut down their arguments or whatever it is. And so you have to be very careful. Okay, do you have any advice about me advertising myself online when I work for a firm? I want to build my client base, but don't want the firm I'm thinking I'm stepping onto their toes, being too independent or something. No, you shouldn't be advertising your services online if you're working for a law firm. What you can do, though, that's fun, is you could set up a website about yourself and then talk about your practice area and what you like about it and put articles on there and start doing Instagram or doing posts and things on it. And if you do get clients from that, which you might, then you need to take those clients to your law firm. So if the law firm thinks that you're trying to solicit clients for yourself and not for them, you'll lose your job. You would fire someone that did that too. You're better off just building your profile and doing that first. A lot of people too, they get ahead of themselves. And I don't know how many years out of school you are, but really your first 5 years out of school, there's nothing wrong with trying to get business and networking things, but you really need to learn a practice area and become very proficient in it. And that takes about 5 years. So thinking about advertising yourself online when you don't have training isn't you should build a profile for yourself, and you can write articles and give talks and you can comment on other people's things and cases or whatever it is you're doing. But I think a lot of people get ahead of themselves and they think that they should be doing something much more important than just doing the work. And honestly, if you spend 5 years and you start learning something when you're 25 and you're done by the time you're 30, then you have those skills and that practice here that'll last you the rest of your career. So people need to get trained, and people don't understand that's you don't learn how to be a lawyer in law school. You learn how to do it after being trained by because yeah. Okay, do you want to still leave us open to staying open to this same question, different one. Is mental health care stigmatized? Yes. You never talk about your weaknesses. There's nothing wrong with needing mental help, but if you tell people you're seeing a therapist and then you get angry, instead of looking at it like you're just angry, people will say, "Oh, the person's got emotional problems." And you have to keep your personal life out of your job. And because if people see that, then it's not helpful. Okay. I feel like I already know your answer, but would you say that associate attorneys post some reviews that aren't completely positive about firms that previously worked? Right, Glassdoor is a bad idea. Yes. So you do not want to get involved in the swamp of Glassdoor or leaving reviews on different websites about different firms that are where you've worked or where you are working. That's just people that think that don't do well. I had an instance where I was talking to a very important partner at a very important firm, like a big firm, and they would look at the websites and things that people visited and where they spent time. And I guess they could tell if you're on the work computer where this is before COVID when I was working in office. But he said that there were all these people that spent a lot of time in above the law, and none of those people ever advanced. Like they just have bad attitudes and things. Now I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm not criticizing above the law or anything, but back then, whatever the time was, it was just a lot of gossip and negative information and things and comments. And people that were of that kind of mindset will look at the people they work for suspiciously. They'll think that grass is greener. They'll celebrate other people's issues, problems, and things. So I would just recommend trying to surround yourself with things that are positive as opposed to things that are negative. And it doesn't really serve a purpose to go and hurt an employer that you worked at. Any employer that you work for paid you, they hired you, they gave you an opportunity. So why would you criticize them. The people you should want any place you work. I know it doesn't happen to anybody, but every place you work, you want those people hopefully saying nice things about you in the future to others, because then that will help you get clients. That will help your reputation in the legal community. So it doesn't do anybody any good to go around and say negative things about people that have given them opportunities in the past. You thank them and you're nice about them. And that it's just a better, why would you have positive energy coming back? Never say anything negative. If anything, defend them to the extent you can. Now, there are really bad people out there and bad employers and that hurt people and do really horrible things. And if that's the case, you may feel the need to tell anybody, but I don't know how much it's going to help you doing something in Gloucester unless there's something really horrible to warn people about. Okay. Thanks for all these questions. They're really good questions today. Hi, Harrison. Thank you for today's webinar. Is there ever a baseline approach when trying to solicit work from partners or clients, or should associates allow the partners and clients to communicate with them first? So yes, you should always be trying to get work from people. Law firms will have cocktail party or not drinks on Fridays and where people stand around. You can talk to people there and try to get work. You should ask for work. You should be trying to get work in every way you can. If you can, you should get work from, if you can get work from clients, and yes, get work from clients. And you should always be soliciting work. Everyone should be soliciting work and trying to get work. It's the name of the game. The other thing is that a lot of people don't think about, and this is important. So you need to find work to be done. So you need to create work. So what does that mean? So that means like you do something for a corporate client, you file some documents for them, and then you say, hey, now would be a good time to review your articles of incorporation and update them based on this. So you're always creating more and more work to keep the money coming in. You need to always make sure that whatever you're doing, you're creating more and more work, and you're getting work from clients, you're getting work from the firm. Because again, if you run out of work, you die. So yes, you should be always trying to get work. And you may be in a situation where you have too much work, you have plenty to do, you don't want to solicit work. You always want to try to do your best to make sure that people are giving you work now, or you will get it from people in the future. Let me see it. Do you think AI is enabling attorneys to increase their values or diminishing the importance of attorneys in their specialized knowledge? Yes, of course, AI is hurting a lot of professions. It's going to have, from what I understand, the biggest impact on family law and a couple of other parts. It doesn't matter as much, but it enables people to increase their efficiency. So it makes things potentially will give you the ability to do more work. But ultimately, your success as an attorney, that people don't necessarily realize your ability to do the work, but then it's also your ability to have relationships. So relationships are where the work comes from, whether it's a client, an outside client giving you work, or it's a firm giving you work. But law firms want to make as much money as possible. They want to have people billing hours. So if AI eliminates 5 attorneys, and that means $5 million in revenue that the law firm could bill goes away, then the law firm's not going to like that. So law firms function on having attorneys bill hours, right? So that's the most important thing to a law firm. If you're not billing hours, then so why would AI result in fewer? You can understand increase in efficiency, but law firms don't necessarily have the ability to do that. If I was an attorney right now and I was using AI, I would use it for everything. I would look at different AI platforms, like not just ChatGPT, but Grok and every other possible one, or Gemini, every other possible one you can. I would learn how to increase the quality of my work. I would have it check my work. I would have it give me additional arguments and things I should be including in contracts or litigation. You should do everything you can to use it to become a better attorney. And it helps you tremendously. So everybody should be using AI. But your success with it comes down to your ability to use prompts and all these different things to get the right results and to the best possible work. So yeah, I would use it for everything if I was practicing right now. It's incredibly important. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Okay, so this is a good question. Thank you for everyone whoever asked this one. This is a good one. So can a working class law student still compete with peers from elite backgrounds when it comes to law firm recruitment, and what should they do differently? Yeah, so working class student can compete with peers from elite backgrounds when it comes to law firm recruitment. But the thing to remember is that I think that one of the problems with people out of working class backgrounds, as opposed to people from, and this is something I notice a lot from, what do you call it? It's called upper middle class, whatever, upper middle class. So one of the issues that people often from working class backgrounds think is they think that they're showing up for a job. The job should pay them as much money as possible. The job that they take is they want the most money. They want to work a certain number of hours and expect a certain result. And if they don't get what they want or they're not getting enough money, they might look for another job. It's just a different way of thinking than a lot of times than people from maybe an upper middle class background that will understand the rules, that will get information from people inside the firm, will share information about the way other people are thinking, what to do, what not to do, all these sorts of things. So if I was a working class student and getting a job in a major law firm, I would do whatever I could to spend as much time as I possibly could with people that have those sorts of backgrounds, even if it made me uncomfortable. I would go out of my way to try to spend time with people from the better backgrounds, because the way they think about things and the way they think about the firm, hopefully the people that are the most successful in the firm that you're joining, you would want to be able to spend as much time as you possibly could with those sorts of people, because that's going to make you understand things better. But a lot of times people from working class backgrounds, the mistakes that they make is they may be in law school and only associating with groups similar to themselves. Then they get out and they get into law firms and they're surrounded by people that have already picked up all these rules and ways of thinking maybe when they're in law school. And now they're surrounded by people that are very successful and also have ways of thinking and are learning about things. And then they keep that mentality and they never pick up the mentality of the people that are going to be successful from these other backgrounds. Regardless of your background, if you're from a working class background, a poor background, it doesn't matter, or a whatever. You have to be able to surround yourself with to get around people that are successful, that think about things in a different way. And that's what can make you successful. And that honestly, that's I think it's one of the most important things. Yes, good question. So here's another one, a question I like. So what are the subtle signs that my law firm treats me as replaceable rather than someone with upper potential? Most law firms will treat you, for the most part, as replaceable. It's just how it is. Because your job, if you're working for someone else, is to bill hours and as long as they need you and to make them money. And so your job is to become irreplaceable. Law firms only make people a partner, for example, when they have to. So they have to make you a partner. If you have a lot of business, they're worried about losing you, you go to another firm, they're making a lot of money from you. Law firms believe that people have upper potential, that do the best work and provide the most value, and are people that the law firm doesn't want to lose and can't, and they need them and that sort of thing. So you need to become irreplaceable if you're going to be successful. You need to provide more value than other people. And if you're not providing as much value as they think they can get on the open market by hiring someone else, or you're not providing as much value as people that you're working with, then you're in trouble. So you always want to be providing as much value as you possibly can. Sorry, I'm just looking at something more. Someone asked if you can get a recorded copy of the webcast. Yes, there'll be one. Someone else asked about the PowerPoint, and yes, I will have the PowerPoint sent to everyone after this. And then let me just see here a couple of minutes. So I'm just looking at some questions here. Sorry. How do you force yourself to make the people you get work from like you, even when you don't like or respect them? So anybody that's giving you work, you should I guess you don't have to like them or respect them. But the problem is if you don't like and respect the people giving you work, then then that's you probably should be working for somewhere else, or you probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing because what does that mean? That means that you should be working with people and a firm where you like the people or you respect the people that are more senior than you that you want to become them. And if you don't want to become the people you're working for, then certainly there's a learning experience you're getting working someplace, but that's really about it, right? So there's no advantage to you to staying in a profession or working in a firm or working with people that you don't or respect. Now, what is that? Another thing I would just say is you don't necessarily need to like or respect everyone. So maybe there's 10 people you get work from and there's a couple you don't like or respect. You still treat them like a client and you still do the best work you can for them. If you're a criminal attorney, you don't necessarily like and respect a child molester if you're representing them. I'm not going to talk about that, but let's just make a criminal attorney representing someone that embezzles money or something. So you may not like or respect that person, but that person is still entitled to you doing a good job and you still want to do the best work you can. So they hire you and don't fire you. So you have to make anybody that's giving you work as a client. And I guess it doesn't matter don't if you don't like or respect everyone, but you should want to be the people you're working for. And if you're not, that's a problem. Okay, what system? This is a cute question. What happens when you become friends with the people at the firm you work for? How do you make them like you without being a friend? So if someone's your friend, then that person will know negative things about you potentially that could hurt you, or they may know positive things. But people have friends at work all the time. I don't think, or the people you work for. Yes, you need to be careful about being friends with the people that you work for. You can because things can happen in relationships. People can get in fights about all sorts of things. You need to be careful. And so yeah, I don't know how to really answer that question because it can be helpful for you to be friends with people that you work for. It's not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but navigating those relationships can be difficult because if you have a falling out with someone you work for, then they're not going to be comfortable with you any longer. They're not going to be so that could and if it's their law firm and they're the partner and you're not, then that's gonna hurt you. So you just need to be very careful again about being friends with people. But again, I think most of the time it works out, but just keeping in mind that if something bad happens with that relationship, it's going to hurt you and the firm. So why would you want to get involved in that necessarily? Be careful. Oh, thanks for this line or question too. Okay, you mentioned about how to create a perception of being exclusive while still being inclusive with the example of the student handing out graduation party invitations. I have difficulty excluding others, perhaps even when I know I should. Do you have tips on a recommendation for a book or article on how to make yourself seem more exclusive and therefore desirable, such as the one you shared when you applied to the firm or job with clients? Yeah, so the best attorneys will appear exclusive. It'll be like they don't represent everyone, and we really want them to represent us. The best attorneys will this whole thing is I guess is just a game. How do you appear exclusive? How do you appear people will set high hourly rates, attorneys that look exclusive, people will do all sorts of things to look exclusive. People will often be chased for jobs as opposed to using a recruiter. A recruiter will find them, or they will use a recruiter that will look like they were found and mark different. People will try to look exclusive. This whole thing about you don't want to exclude others, perhaps you should, but you just need to appear someone that has value, and you're not necessarily giving your time to everybody. You're careful and that sort of thing. I actually don't have any books about this, but I will just say that any product or service that has some sort of exclusivity to it is always going to be more valued than something that doesn't. A car that costs $200,000 is going to be considered more exclusive than one that doesn't. So there's just all these different kind of things attorneys are the people evaluate each other with, and being anything that's exclusive and harder to get into is more valued than something that's not. So give me 1 second. Okay, I think that's about all the questions. Let me just see. A little question from the law firms, but I think I've answered them. Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you everyone for being on this webinar. I hope it was helpful. This is a extremely important topic, and if you do learn these things, and you feel like you learned and absorbed what I talked about today, it should make a major difference from you. And I will send around the PowerPoints for this. And the one just important point to understand is like understanding just a few of these points can really make a huge difference in your ultimate success. If you listen to what I understood today, you understand it, and or at least most of it, I think it's going to make you a lot more successful. And I hope you keep coming back to these. Like I said, I hear from people every week whose careers, sometimes it's only one webinar day. So one thing they learn, they might have watched 20 and then they got a lot out of one or two, and then it made a huge difference. And the big thing is that anybody can be extremely successful in this profession, regardless of where you went to law school, regardless of what's happened to you in the past, regardless of what you think you're capable of. By learning the sorts of information and just figuring it out and letting your mind and even your subconscious mind, like after watching something like this and reading things, you will figure it out and be successful if you want to. And it's a great profession. There's very few professions where you can get your own clients and keep going throughout your own career, and where it's licensed to practice law is exclusive and other people can't do it. And so it's a great profession, but you have to make the right decisions. And what we talked about today is one way to do it. So thank you and have a good rest of your week. And I'll be back next week.